You've spent years being the good woman, the one who shows up, who waits, who bends to make others comfortable. Yet somehow, you remain the one left on the outside, watching the ones you give your heart to drift away like shadows at dusk. You feel it deep in your bones, the aching emptiness where trust was supposed to live. This is not your failure. It's a wound everyone in your place knows but rarely names. You carry the weight of being unseen, unheard, and ultimately unchosen. But what if this story could change? Not through empty promises or quick fixes, but through a fierce reckoning with the parts of yourself you've hidden, denied, or feared. What if the obsession he couldn't escape began not with his desire, but with the moment you embraced your own shadow, the unknown, unacknowledged parts of your soul? This story is not about him. It is about you, about the power you reclaim when you step into the depths of your own darkness, pull the jagged pieces together, and rise whole and sovereign. It will help you understand why you keep chasing people who never truly choose you, and how you can stop. Because until the shadow is met, the cycle continues. Until you meet yourself fully, no one else can see you clearly. You might wonder, what is shadow work? It's not self-help fluff or a trendy word. It's the ancient practice of facing the parts of yourself you have buried beneath layers of conditioning and pain. The jealousies, the fears, the rage you learn to hide to survive. Carl Jung called it the shadow because it lives in the unconscious, the part of your psyche rejected by light but never absent. It waits in silence, and until you recognize it, it controls you in ways you don't understand. Look closely at the patterns you've lived. Why do you keep giving away your light to those who take it for granted? Why does your kindness feel like a chain? The truth is this: they never loved your kindness. They loved your compliance. This is a brutal but necessary truth. Compliance is the shadow's trick, the part that keeps you small so others can feel big. But when you stop complying, when you step into the full weight of your presence, you become an enigma they can't ignore. The obsession starts here, at the moment you refuse to disappear. It's not about changing him or forcing his gaze. It's about your transformation. You're becoming a mythic figure who no longer needs approval or permission. Imagine a queen in exile who returns to claim her throne, not by battling armies, but by conquering the wars inside herself. That is the woman who becomes the obsession, not because she seeks it, but because she commands it. You have known the sting of waiting, the silence after the call that never comes, the ghost of what if haunting your nights. This pain is the shadow's signal calling you to dive beneath surface illusions. To reclaim your story, you must first witness the wounds that shaped you. Ask yourself, what parts of you have been forced to hide? What truths have you silenced because they seemed too fierce, too wild, too much? Tonight, begin this reclaiming with a simple act. Say no once to something you don't want. Feel the resistance rise. Notice the fear whisper, telling you to stay small, to keep pleasing. But you do it anyway. That single no is a crack in the prison of your old patterns. It is the beginning of the revolution within. The shadow does not vanish with a single act, but each small refusal builds a new landscape where you can live free. You are not your fears. You are the fierce witness who looks them in the eye and says, "You do not own me." Every time you embrace your shadow, you grow roots deeper than doubt and branches wider than expectation. You might ask, why does this matter to him? Because obsession is not about possession, it is about recognition. When you carry the light of your wholeness, flawed, dark, and radiant, there is no escaping your gravity. This is not manipulation, it is sovereignty. The kind of presence that unsettles, fascinates, and lingers long after you have left the room. In this journey, the archetypes of myth become your allies. The shadow is not just darkness, it is the dragon guarding your treasure. The queen is not just a title, she is the force of your reclaimed self. The obsession is not a curse, it is the echo of your awakened soul calling across the void. So ask yourself, How long will you continue bleeding for people who never saw your wounds? How long will you give pieces of yourself in exchange for crumbs of attention? The path to becoming the obsession is through radical acceptance of your shadow and the courage to stand unflinching in your full complexity. Tonight, say no once. Watch how it feels. Let this be your first act of sovereignty in a world that taught you to surrender. This is not just a practice, it is a declaration. The declaration that you are no longer the good woman waiting in the wings. You are the queen who commands the stage, shadow and all. Yep. And when the obsession comes, it will not be because you chased it, but because you have become the story no one can turn away from. The story that lives in the deep places where light and dark merge. A story written in the language of the soul's fierce awakening. The shadow is often mistaken for something to fear, to suppress, or to deny. Yet it is neither enemy nor curse. It is the unspoken truth hidden beneath your polished surface. When you begin the slow, deliberate process of shadow work, you touch the raw edges of your being, the parts you were taught to discard or ignore. This is where your power lies, not in the light you show the world, but in the darkness you claim as your own. It is no accident that the obsession began when shadow work started, because obsession is born from authenticity. When you step into your shadow, you stop performing. The masks fall away. Suddenly, the world, especially those who once took you for granted, cannot look away. This is the paradox of power. The more you accept the darkness within, the brighter your light becomes. Consider the archetype of the phoenix, a creature consumed by fire, only to rise from its ashes renewed and whole. Your shadow is the fire that consumes your old self. The fear, the shame, the silent acquiescence, all of it burns away to reveal a soul forged in fierce clarity. He becomes obsessed not because you changed for him, but because you stopped changing for him. You cease to be the woman who exists solely to soothe, to please, or to be small. You became a force of nature, wild, unpredictable, sovereign. Ask yourself now, how often have you dimmed your light to fit into a role crafted by others? How many times have you swallowed your rage, your ambition, your truth, to avoid conflict or rejection? Each time you do, you fragment your soul. You become a shadow of yourself, a shadow others chase because they sense the light you're hiding but can never fully grasp. Shadow work demands brutal honesty. It asks you to face the parts of yourself you feared losing, your anger, your jealousy, your pride. But here is the sacred paradox. These parts are not your enemies. They are the guardians of your boundaries, the fire that fuels your courage, the echo of your worth. To deny them is to live half alive, forever chasing a phantom of acceptance. You may resist this truth. You may cling to the comfort of being good, of being the woman who forgives, who bends, who waits. But ask yourself, who benefits from your sacrifice? Who wins when you shrink to fit their needs? The answer is always the same, not you. Tonight, challenge this story. Begin with one small act of reclaiming. Speak your truth in a conversation where you would usually stay silent. Hold your ground in a moment when you would normally cave. Each act is a seed planted in the soil of your sovereignty. It will not bloom overnight, but it will grow stronger with every refusal to surrender yourself. The obsession he feels is the reflection of your transformation. It is not a simple infatuation, but a recognition of the boundary you now embody. He senses the shadow you have integrated, the strength you no longer hide, and it unsettles him because it challenges his own illusions. You have become a mirror to his unconscious, a figure he cannot escape because you reveal what he denies within himself. Remember the story of the forgotten queen who was exiled, deemed too dangerous, too unyielding. She was cast out not because she lacked power, but because her power threatened the fragile kingdoms built on compliance and silence. Yet in exile she did not break. She grew roots in the barren soil, became a myth whispered in shadows. When she returned, it was not with armies but with an unshakable presence that demanded acknowledgement. This queen is you, once hidden, now rising. But sovereignty is not a destination, it is a practice. It requires daily choices to honor your inner life above external validation. It means sitting with discomfort, with the parts of yourself that still resist, and saying, "You are welcome here." This radical acceptance is the foundation of your obsession, not for him, but for yourself. You may ask, what about love? What about connection? Shadow work does not sever you from others. It deepens your capacity to love, not as a desperate plea, but as a sovereign gift. When you embrace your shadow, you stop chasing love from the outside and begin cultivating it from within. This internal source cannot be taken away, bargained for, or diminished. Tonight's challenge is simple but profound. Sit in stillness and ask your shadow what it wants you to see. Listen without judgment. Write down the truths that arise, no matter how uncomfortable. These are the pieces of your soul waiting to be reclaimed. This is where the obsession begins, not in his eyes, but in the meeting place of your fractured self becoming whole. The stories you tell yourself about worthiness, love, and power are the chains that key you in the old cycle. Break one link tonight. Choose one thought that no longer serves you and refuse to feed it. Watch how your body responds. This is the beginning of your reclamation. Remember, obsession is not about possession or control. It is the undeniable presence that emerges when you stop hiding. It is the ripple effect of shadow work, silent but seismic. It is the energy that makes you unforgettable, not because you change for others, but because you have become unchangeable. So ask yourself now, if not now, when? How long will you carry the weight of invisibility for those who never truly saw you? How long will you bleed for a love that only exists in your hopes? The shadow calls you to a different path, a path where your light and darkness coexist in fierce harmony. You are not broken, you are not less. You are whole, waiting for your courage to catch up. The obsession he feels is a byproduct of your awakening, a signpost on the road to sovereignty. When you claim your shadow, you no longer ask to be seen. You simply are. To walk the path of shadow work is to step into a quiet battlefield, where the fiercest enemy is the voice inside that says you are not enough. It is there, in the silence after the world's applause fades, that the true war unfolds. You confront the fractures carved by old wounds, the whispered lies that shaped your self-worth. But here lies the cruel paradox. These very fractures, once acknowledged and embraced, become the source of an unshakable power. You might have believed that to be desired, to be obsession-worthy, you needed to polish away the rough edges. But the truth is far more brutal and beautiful. It is the cracks in the armor that let the light in, the parts of yourself you have been taught to hide, reject, or soften, that make you magnetic. This magnetism is not about perfection. It is about authenticity so raw and unfiltered that it unsettles the carefully constructed illusions of those around you. Ask yourself, what parts of you have you dimmed to avoid rejection? What truths have you muted in the hope of acceptance? These silenced parts are your shadow. They are the wild rivers beneath the calm surface of your persona, carrying the force that shapes your destiny. When you begin to listen, truly listen to this inner torrent, you start to understand the cycles that have bound you. The chase after someone who never fully chooses you is not a mystery. It is a mirror. It reflects the internal chase within yourself, the pursuit of wholeness through fragments you've lost or discarded. This internal fragmentation creates a hunger that no external validation can fill. It is a hunger he unconsciously senses. Your shadow work interrupts this hunger, not by filling it with another person's attention, but by returning the pieces to yourself. Consider the archetype of the warrior queen who does not seek battle but faces it when it comes. She knows that sovereignty is earned not by conquest of others but by mastery of self. Each act of shadow work is a battle fought in silence, naming your anger, claiming your desires, owning your rage, embracing your fears. These battles are unseen but seismic. They crack the foundation of old stories that kept you small. Tonight's challenge is to confront one shadow fear directly. What truth have you been too afraid to admit to yourself, to others? Speak it aloud, write it down, own it fully. This act is not weakness. It is the fiercest form of courage. It shifts the internal balance from exile to homecoming. You may wonder why this inner work matters so deeply to him, the one who becomes obsessed. Obsession is often mistaken for possession or control, but it is something else entirely. It is the mirror reflecting a presence that cannot be denied. When you become whole, shadow included, you no longer live in halves or halves promised to others. You live in your entirety. This presence unsettles, fascinates, and holds a gravity that no charm or manipulation can mimic. Recall the myth of the siren who lured sailors not with promises, but with undeniable truth sung beneath the waves. She was not a creature of illusion but of fierce reality, impossible to resist because she embodied the depths of the ocean itself, dark, wild, and infinite. Your shadow is that ocean. When you meet it, you become the siren of your own story, no longer chasing love or approval, but attracting it through the sheer force of your authenticity. But sovereignty is not granted, it is claimed. It requires a steady gaze inward, a relentless refusal to soften the edges to make others comfortable. It asks you to hold space for your contradictions, the tenderness and the rage, the vulnerability and the armor, the light and the dark. This is the essence of mythic power, to live fully in the tension between opposites without collapsing into fear or denial. Tonight, take one boundary and reinforce it. Refuse to negotiate your peace for the sake of another's comfort. Notice how your body responds to this choice. This micro-shift is the act of becoming unyielding, of reclaiming your territory. You might ask, what does love look like after shadow work? It is not the desperate grasp for affection or the endless chase for validation. Love becomes a sovereign exchange, a meeting of whole beings who do not seek to complete but to complement. It is a radical, mutual recognition born from deep self-knowledge. The obsession he cannot escape is the silent acknowledgement of this transformation. It is the echo of your shadow becoming your strength, your fear turning into fire, your brokenness weaving into a tapestry of fierce beauty. It is not his obsession that defines you, but the sovereignty that makes obsession inevitable. So ask yourself, how much longer will you carry the weight of invisibility? How long will you allow the silence inside to be louder than your voice? The shadow calls you to a revolution, not of outward conquest, but of inward reclamation. You are not less because you have darkness. You are whole because you have faced it. The obsession is the shadow's echo, a sign you are becoming the mythic queen of your own soul's story. When you claim every part of yourself, you become impossible to forget. The journey into shadow work is neither gentle nor swift. It is a descent into a hidden realm where you confront the ghosts that have haunted your nights, the shame you carried like a secret badge, the rage buried beneath polite smiles, the yearning for something more that you dared not name. This is where transformation roots itself, not in fleeting victories, but in the slow, relentless excavation of your truth. You have lived much of your life as a silent witness to your own fading light, dimming yourself to fit the roles others designed. But the shadow reveals what the light cannot see, that the very parts you feared losing are the wellspring of your obsession, the magnetic force no one can escape, because it is forged in raw authenticity. There is a timeless story of a goddess who was cast into darkness, believed lost to the world. Yet in the depths, She gathered her fragmented soul and emerged not as a broken figure, but as a sovereign force, her power tempered by the shadows she embraced. She became a beacon not through perfection, but through the fierce ownership of every part of herself. This goddess is not a myth. She is the echo of your own becoming. What if the obsession he feels is less about who he is and more about who you have become? When you carry the light of your integrated shadow, you become a force that unsettles the familiar order of relationships. You break the spell of invisibility because you refuse to be invisible to yourself. And in that refusal, you reclaim your story, your body, your soul. Ask yourself now, how many times have you sought to fix yourself through the eyes of another? How often have you waited for permission to be fully seen, fully loved? Shadow work teaches a brutal truth. The permission you seek is yours alone to give. No one else can hand you the keys to your own kingdom. Until you unlock the gates from within, the obsession remains an echo, a call that will never be answered by the outside world. Tonight, practice this. Confront one limiting belief you carry about yourself. Speak it into the quiet. Then question it with fierce honesty. Where did it come from? Who benefits from you holding it? How does it keep you from your full power? This exercise is not about self-judgment but liberation. Each challenge to your old stories cracks open space for new truths to emerge. The obsession he cannot escape is your shadow speaking loudest, not in words but in presence. It is the undeniable gravity of a woman who has faced her darkness and refused to be diminished by it. It is a force not born of chasing, but of becoming. The obsession is not about him controlling you. It is about you owning yourself so completely that he can no longer look away. Consider the mythic figure of the queen who ruled her land from exile, not by force, but by the silent strength of her unbroken will. Her shadow was her crown, her scars the map of battles won beneath the surface. She returned not as a woman seeking validation, but as a sovereign presence demanding recognition. This queen is your mirror, reflecting what you become when you choose shadow over silence. Love, after shadow work, transforms into something unrecognizable to those still lost in pursuit. It becomes a space where boundaries are sacred, where desire is not desperation, and where connection grows from mutual respect, not neediness. This love is not something to chase. It is a sanctuary you build within yourself first. You might ask, how can one embrace darkness and still claim light? Because light without shadow is incomplete. It is the union of both that creates wholeness. Your shadow is the fertile ground where your true self grows, wild and untamed. It is the fire that tempers your soul's steel. Tonight's F. Inal challenge for this part. Sit with your shadow's presence without judgment. Breathe into the discomfort it brings. Notice how resistance softens when you meet it with steady gaze. This practice is the gateway to sovereignty. Each moment spent in shadow integration is a stitch in the tapestry of your awakened self. The obsession is not a fleeting infatuation. It is the silent recognition of a soul that refuses to be half-lived. It is the echo of your shadow transforming into your strength, your fear into fuel, your brokenness into power. When you claim every fragment of your being, you become impossible to forget, not because you seek to be, but because you simply are. Ask yourself, if not now, when? How long will you let your light be dimmed by old stories? How long will you carry wounds meant to be healed? The shadow calls you to rise, to reclaim, to reign. You are not broken. You are whole. You are never less. The obsession he feels is the reflection of your fierce becoming. It is the mythic dance between darkness and light, your story rewritten in the language of sovereignty. There is a fierce beauty in becoming the woman who no longer asks for permission to exist fully. This beauty is forged in the crucible of shadow work, where you wrestle with the parts of yourself that have long been relegated to silence, the rage, the grief, the unspoken desires. These fragments, once feared, are the very elements that make you magnetic, unyielding, and unforgettable. Imagine the ancient queen who, stripped of her throne and exiled into the wilderness, did not succumb to despair. Instead, she faced the raw wilderness within, the wild, untamed shadow, and emerged more powerful than before. Her exile was not an end but a beginning, a necessary descent into the depths of herself where true sovereignty is born. This queen is a mythic reflection of your journey. Your shadow work is your wilderness. The obsession he cannot escape is the ripple of your rebirth. Why does this matter to you? Because the cycle of chasing and being chased is rooted in a fragmented self, a self that is not fully claimed or understood. Until you engage with your shadow, you remain caught in patterns of seeking validation from others rather than from within. You offer pieces of yourself as currency for love, attention, and worth, but the price is your sovereignty. The obsession begins the moment you stop the chase. It begins when you stand firm in your complexity, no longer shrinking to fit someone else's comfort. When you claim your darkness alongside your light, you become a presence that cannot be ignored or dismissed. This presence is not about manipulation. It is about truth. It is the difference between a flickering candle and a roaring fire. Tonight, take a small but profound action. Identify one pattern you've repeated in relationships that no longer serves you. Write it down. Reflect on how this pattern connects to parts of your shadow, perhaps fear, neediness, or self-doubt. Then, commit to interrupting this pattern in one way tomorrow. This is how sovereignty is practiced, through small, intentional acts that honor your full self. You may wonder, how can embracing my shadow make me more attractive or desirable? The answer lies in authenticity. People are drawn not to perfection but to truth. When you own every part of yourself, flawed, fierce, vulnerable, you become a living paradox that defies easy understanding. This paradox is magnetic. It invites obsession because it challenges others to see beyond their projections and illusions. Remember the story of the siren who sang not to lure with false promises, but to reveal deep truths beneath the surface. Her power was not in deception, but in her unwavering presence, wild, untamed, and real. Your shadow is that oceanic depth. When you meet it, you become the siren of your own narrative, calling forth those who resonate with your truth and compelling even the reluctant to pay attention. Sovereignty is not a destination but a daily choice. It requires standing in your truth, especially when it is uncomfortable. It means saying no to what diminishes you and yes to what nurtures your soul. It means holding space for your contradictions, the tenderness and the fury, the longing and the independence, without apology. Tonight, reinforce one boundary that has been blurred or ignored. Observe how your body and mind respond. This simple act is a declaration. You will no longer be compromised for the sake of peace or approval. It is a reclaiming of your territory, your energy, your self-respect. You might ask, what does love look like after shadow work? It is a sacred exchange, grounded in mutual respect and honesty. It is not about filling voids, but about expanding connection from a place of wholeness. Love becomes a sanctuary, not a battlefield. The obsession he cannot escape is the silent acknowledgement of your sovereignty, a reflection of your shadow embraced and your power reclaimed. It is not about control or possession. It is about presence. Your presence is a force that unsettles old dynamics and demands a new way of relating. So ask yourself now, how much longer will you carry the weight of invisibility? How long will you bleed for love that only exists in your hope? The shadow calls you to rise, to reclaim, to reign. You are not broken. You are whole. The obsession he feels is the mirror of your fierce awakening, the mythic dance between shadow and light, the story of your sovereignty unfolding. There comes a moment in every woman's journey where the familiar scripts no longer suffice. The roles assigned, the good daughter, the accommodating lover, the quiet caretaker, begin to feel like prisons. The yearning for something more, something real, becomes impossible to ignore. This restlessness is not a whim but a summons from your deeper self, the voice beneath the noise, calling you to meet your shadow with unwavering courage. This meeting is the crucible of transformation. The shadow is not simply the sum of your fears or flaws. It is a complex mosaic of truths you've denied. The parts of you that rage against injustice, crave wildness, seek freedom. To face your shadow is to confront the raw edges of your soul, those places where light and dark intertwine in a fierce dance. This is where true sovereignty is forged. You may have lived in the illusion that being loved requires sacrifice, that to be wanted means hiding your storms. But this illusion fractures you. It scatters your power. The obsession he feels begins when you reject this fracture, when you claim your storms as part of your story, not as stains to be erased, but as signatures of your survival and strength. Ask yourself, how often have you smoothed over your edges to make others comfortable? How many times have you muted your voice or swallowed your fury for the sake of peace? Each time you do, you send a silent message to yourself and the world that your full self is not safe, not worthy. Shadow work invites you to rewrite this message. It demands that you welcome your whole self, even the parts that scare you. It is not a journey into darkness, but a reclaiming of light hidden within shadow. This reclamation shifts the energy around you. It changes how you move, speak, and hold space. You become a force not of pleasing, but of presence. Tonight, practice radical witnessing. When a fear or uncomfortable feeling arises, do not push it away. Sit with it. Name it. Ask, what is this trying to teach me? This simple practice cracks open the door to your shadow's wisdom, transforming fear into insight. Why does this matter to the obsession he feels? Because obsession is not about control or possession. It is the echo of a presence that refuses to be ignored. When you integrate your shadow, you embody a completeness that unsettles old patterns of relating. You no longer seek validation from others because you are already whole. This wholeness is magnetic, not because it demands attention, but because it commands it. Reflect on the archetype of the wild woman who lives untamed by society's rules. She is neither broken nor broken-hearted. She is whole, wild, and sovereign. Her shadow is her power, her rage a source of creation, not destruction. This wild woman is not a myth but a blueprint for your becoming. Sovereignty is not the absence of struggle but the mastery of it. It is the ability to hold your contradictions without shame or apology. It is the choice to live fully in your complexity, to embrace the sacred tension between light and dark. Tonight, set a boundary that honors your shadow's truth. Protect your energy fiercely. Notice how this choice shifts your internal landscape. This act is a step toward unyielding self-respect and a declaration that you will no longer be diminished for another's comfort. You might wonder, what does love look like when you carry shadow work's weight? It is a love grounded in freedom, not chains, in truth, not illusions. It is a love where both partners stand whole, offering connection without losing themselves. The obsession he cannot escape is the reflection of your shadow's integration, the dance of your power and vulnerability woven into a presence impossible to ignore. It is not about possession but recognition. When you claim your shadow, you stop chasing love and instead become the force that draws it to you. So ask yourself, how long will you stay in the shadows of your own fear? How long will you sacrifice your truth for approval? The shadow calls you to rise, to reclaim, to reign. You are not less. You are more. The obsession he feels is the mirror of your fierce sovereignty, the mythic story of your soul's awakening, the dance between darkness and light. The moment you choose to confront your shadow, the world around you begins to shift, often before you even realize it. This shift is not always visible, but it is undeniable. It ripples through your relationships, your sense of self, and the way others perceive you. The obsession that once felt like a cruel fixation becomes a silent witness to your transformation. It is not about him. It is about the awakening that has taken root deep within you. You have been taught to fear your shadow, to hide your anger, dismiss your desires, and smooth out your rough edges. But these shadows are not flaws. They are your soul's language, the map to your deepest power. When you refuse to hide them, you become a living paradox, both fierce and vulnerable, broken and whole. This paradox unsettles those around you because it defies their need for simplicity and control. Consider the myth of the huntress who wandered the dark forest alone, guided only by the stars and her fierce heart. She carried both bow and burden, strength and solitude. The huntress was feared and misunderstood, but she was sovereign because she refused to surrender her wildness for the comfort of others. She embodies the woman who becomes the obsession, not through seeking, but through being utterly herself. Ask yourself, how much of your energy has been spent trying to fit into someone else's story? How many times have you sacrificed your voice to avoid conflict or loss? These sacrifices chip away at your soul until you become a shadow of your own potential. Shadow work is the reclamation of those lost fragments, the fierce, untamed parts you were told to silence. Tonight, make a pact with yourself to honor one shadow aspect that you've denied or feared. Look it in the eye. Speak to it as you would a wounded friend. This act of radical acceptance is the birthplace of true power. It transforms fear into fuel and brokenness into a throne. Why does this ignite obsession in others? Because obsession is not about control. It is about recognition. When you become whole, integrating both light and shadow, you radiate a presence that no one can ignore. You are no longer a half-seen flicker but a blazing flame, wild, real, and sovereign. Remember the story of the phoenix, burned to ashes only to rise again, more radiant and unyielding. Your shadow work is your own fiery rebirth. The obsession is the echo of your rising, a sign that you have crossed a threshold from fragmentation to wholeness. Sovereignty demands daily courage. It asks you to live your contradictions without apology. It is the choice to stand tall in your fullness, refusing to diminish for comfort or approval. This fierce stance rewires the energy around you, reshaping old dynamics and setting new boundaries. Tonight, practice reinforcing your sovereignty with a small but firm boundary. Observe the subtle shifts within, how your body holds space differently, how your mind quiets the old doubts. This micro-shift is a step away from the old patterns of chasing and towards the new reality of owning your power. You may wonder what love looks like when you no longer chase it. It is no longer a desperate pursuit, but a sacred meeting of whole selves. It is a love where freedom and connection coexist, where boundaries are respected, and where desire flows without neediness. The obsession he cannot escape is the reflection of this transformation. It is the silent acknowledgement of your sovereignty, the shadow you embraced and the power you reclaimed. It is not a chain, but a mirror held up to his own unconscious, challenging and compelling. So ask yourself, how long will you carry the weight of invisibility? How long will you bleed for love that lives only in your hope? The shadow calls you to rise, to reclaim, to reign. You are not broken. You are whole. The obsession he feels is the mythic dance of your awakening, the story of your soul's fierce sovereignty unfolding. This is the moment when silence becomes a roar, the moment when the parts of yourself you buried begin to speak with relentless clarity. You have lived too long under the weight of invisibility, shrinking to fit roles that suffocate. Now, you are summoned to the wild terrain of your own shadow, where every fragment, rage, fear, longing, defiance, waits to be reclaimed. The obsession he cannot escape begins here, not in his eyes, but in your fierce acceptance of all you are. It is the power that radiates when you stop hiding the parts of yourself others deemed unacceptable. This power is neither fragile nor fleeting. It is an ancient force, woven through the stories of forgotten queens who ruled not by force, but by the unyielding presence of their whole selves. Ask yourself, how many times have you bent to soothe another's discomfort? How often have you silenced your truth to keep the peace? Each act of silence is a fracture, a piece of your sovereignty surrendered. Shadow work is the fierce act of gathering those pieces, stitching them into a tapestry of raw, sovereign beauty. You are not simply the sum of your wounds. You are the warrior who stands in their light, holding space for every contradiction, the tenderness and the fury, the brokenness and the strength. This is the essence of mythic power, to live fully in the tension between light and shadow without flinching. Tonight, confront one shadow belief that has kept you small. Name it, own it, then challenge it with radical honesty. Where did this belief originate? Who benefits from your holding it? What would happen if you let it go? This small act is a seed of sovereignty, a quiet revolution in your inner kingdom. Obsession is often misunderstood as possession or control, but it is something far more profound. It is the mirror held up to a presence so complete, so raw, that it unsettles the familiar and demands recognition. When you become whole, you stop chasing approval. You become the force others unconsciously seek, whether they admit it or not. Reflect on the mythic figure of the exiled queen who returned not with armies but with an unbreakable will. Her shadow was her crown, her scars, the map of battles won beneath silence. This queen's return is your own, an awakening into a sovereignty forged in shadow and light. Sovereignty is not a destination but a practice, a series of daily choices to honor your full self. It means holding boundaries with fierce compassion, saying no to what diminishes you, and yes to what nurtures your soul. It means loving yourself fiercely, especially the parts you once feared. Tonight, strengthen one boundary that has been blurred. Notice how this act shifts your internal landscape. This is not a small thing. It is the act of reclaiming your energy, your time, your self-respect. You might wonder, what does love look like after shadow work? It is a sacred exchange, grounded in truth and freedom, where connection grows from mutual respect, not neediness. The obsession he cannot escape is the silent acknowledgement of your sovereignty, the dance of your shadow embraced and your power reclaimed. It is not control but recognition. When you claim your shadow, you stop chasing love and become the force that draws it. So ask yourself, how long will you live in the shadow of your own fear? How long will you sacrifice your truth for another's comfort? The shadow calls you to rise, reclaim, and reign. You are whole. You were never less. The obsession he feels is the mirror of your fierce sovereignty, the mythic story of your awakening.